Kim, just everybody.
You think the world of them?
I just think they're good. Well,
you think they're good people?
I don't. I haven't.
So that
had
means
the
that you
same
don't. That means you don't believe me.
Don't say that. I haven't had your reaction to Chloe. I've never met her a day in my life.
So you like Chloe? That's what's up. You a hit.
I don't think nobody would not.
Michael B. Jordan wouldn't. You a real savage, bro. And honestly, a nigga gotta respect that. I mean, when it's at the high level of savagery, nobody can say nothing to you. You don't believe me. Because if you did, then you wouldn't want to f them.
You don't believe me because you want to F*** them. That was the moment everything changed. No jokes, no laughter, no entertainment energy, just silence. Because when Ray J said that directly to Cam Newton, it didn't feel like an interview anymore. Felt like a breakdown. And trust me, this wasn't supposed to go like that. What started as a casual conversation quickly turned into one of the most uncomfortable, intense, and revealing moments we've seen in a long time. Because for the first time, Ray J didn't sound like he was joking. He didn't sound like he was playing a character. He sounded hurt, and not just a little frustrated. We're talking about years of built-up anger, confusion, and desperation, all coming out in one moment where he felt like nobody in the room was actually listening to him. Because here's the thing, Ray J wasn't just telling a story. He was begging to be believed. But every time he tried to explain himself, every time he tried to give his version of what really happened behind the scenes with the Kardashian family, something kept getting in the way. Doubt, skepticism, and most importantly, perception. Because to Cam, this wasn't personal. He kept it neutral, balanced, careful. But to Ray J, that neutrality felt like betrayal. And that's when the line crossed. Because what he said next didn't just challenge Cam. It exposed something deeper, something uncomfortable, something that made everyone watching stop and ask, is Ray J actually telling the truth? And nobody wants to accept it? Or is this just another moment where emotion is overpowering reality? Because what happens next doesn't just get awkward, it gets real. And once you see how this conversation unfolds, you'll understand why this moment is going viral and why people are completely divided over who's right. Stay with me, because this is where everything starts to unravel. To understand why that moment hit so hard, you have to rewind, because what Ray J said to Cam Newton didn't come out of nowhere. That line, "You don't believe me," wasn't just frustration in the moment. It was years of tension, years of feeling misunderstood, and most importantly, years of trying to control a narrative that, according to Ray J, was never truly his. Because when people hear Ray J's name, there's one story that always follows him. No matter what he does, no matter how successful he becomes, no matter how many businesses he builds, that one chapter, his connection to the Kardashian family, never goes away. And that's where everything starts. Now, for a long time, the public believed they understood that story. It was simple. It was clean. It was packaged perfectly for media consumption. But according to Ray J, that version of events isn't the full truth. In fact, he's been hinting over and over again that what really happened behind the scenes is much more complicated and much more calculated than people realize. The problem is, every time he tries to explain it, people don't fully listen. And that's where perception comes in. Because in today's world, the way someone looks matters just as much as what they say. And Ray J, he's built a reputation over the years that makes people question him. Not always seriously, sometimes jokingly, sometimes dismissively, but the result is the same. When he speaks, people hesitate to believe. Now compare that to the Kardashian brand. Controlled, polished, strategic, every move calculated, every narrative managed, every appearance aligned with a bigger image. And when you put those two worlds next to each other, you start to see the imbalance. Because it's not just Ray J versus a family. It's Ray J versus a machine. And according to him, that machine knows exactly how to shape public opinion. Now let's bring in Cam Newton, because his role in this situation is just as important. Cam isn't directly involved in the history. He's not part of the original story. He's not carrying the emotional weight that Ray J is. Instead, he represents something else. The audience, the observer, the the person trying to understand both sides without taking a strong position. And on paper, that sounds fair, balanced, reasonable. But in a situation like this, neutrality doesn't always feel neutral. Because when one person is speaking from emotion and the other is responding with logic, there's a disconnect. And that's exactly what started happening in this conversation. Ray J wasn't just sharing information. He was sharing pain, talking about feeling misrepresented, talking about decisions that, according to him, were orchestrated, talking about how a narrative was created and how that narrative followed him for years. Meanwhile, Cam was trying to stay grounded, trying to avoid making definitive statements about people he doesn't personally know, trying to keep the conversation from turning into direct accusations. But here's the problem. To Ray J, that caution felt like disbelief, and that disbelief felt like rejection. Because in his mind, this isn't a debate. This is his life, his image, his legacy. And every time someone says, "I don't know," or "I can't judge," what he hears is, "I don't believe you," and that's where the tension begins to build. Now here's what makes this even more complicated, because Ray J isn't just dealing with public perception. He's dealing with time, years of this narrative existing, years of people forming opinions, years of jokes, headlines, and assumptions shaping how he's seen. And once a narrative has been around that long, changing it becomes almost impossible, because people don't just believe what they hear, they believe what they've been hearing for years. And that's why this moment matters so much, because this wasn't just another interview. This was one of the few times where Ray J felt like he had the space to explain himself, to lay everything out, to finally be heard. And when that didn't happen the way he expected, everything shifted, because what started as a conversation turned into confrontation. Now let's talk about the bigger picture, because this isn't just about Ray J and Cam. This is about how the industry works, how narratives are created, how certain voices get amplified and others get questioned. Because in situations like this, it's not always about who's right. It's about who's believable. And that comes down to image, presentation, consistency. Ray J himself even hints at this during the conversation. That perception becomes reality. That the way you appear can determine whether people accept your truth or reject it. And that's a dangerous space to be in, because it means even if you're telling the truth, you can still lose the narrative. Now add another layer to this, the idea of culture, because Cam references this concept during the conversation, talking about loyalty to the culture, protecting certain images, being careful about what you say publicly, and that adds pressure. Because now it's not just about personal belief, it's about public responsibility. What you say, who you support, what narrative you reinforce. And in that moment, Cam chose caution, but Ray J, he chose confrontation. And that's where everything breaks. Because when one person is trying to protect balance, and the other is trying to force truth, the conversation can't stay calm. It has to escalate. And that escalation leads to the line that changed everything. The moment where emotion took over. The moment where frustration turned into accusation. The moment where Ray J stopped trying to explain and started calling things out directly. Because at that point, he wasn't trying to convince anymore. He was reacting. And once that happens, there's no going back. Now the conversation isn't about the past. It's about the present. About what's being said in real time, about how people are reacting, and most importantly, about who the audience believes. Because as this moment unfolds, it becomes clear that this isn't just about facts. It's about trust, and trust is already broken. So now the real question isn't just what happened before, it's what happens next. Because once a conversation reaches that level of tension, it doesn't end quietly. It either explodes, or it reveals something nobody was expecting. And trust me, what happens next, it doesn't just add to the story, it changes it completely. The tension didn't explode all at once. It built, slowly, uncomfortably, and if you watch the moment closely, you can actually feel it happening in real time. first, everything seemed like a normal interview. Questions being asked, stories being shared, reactions coming in naturally. Cam Newton stayed composed, measured, calm, trying to navigate the conversation without stepping too far in any direction. But Ray J, he wasn't in that space. Not mentally, not emotionally, because from the beginning something felt different. His tone wasn't playful. His energy wasn't light. There was a weight behind everything he said. And the more he talked, the clearer it became. He wasn't there to entertain. He was there to be heard. Now here's where things start shifting. Because as Ray J begins to talk about his past, his connection to the Kardashian family, you can hear the frustration creeping in. He's not just explaining events. He's challenging the narrative, saying things were orchestrated, hinting that what the public believes isn't what actually happened. And at first, Cam listens, nods, responds carefully, but he doesn't fully commit. And that's the problem. Because for someone in Ray J's position, half belief feels like disbelief. So when Cam says things like, "I don't know them personally, I can't judge, I just think they're good people," those words don't land as neutral. They land as dismissive. And that's when the tension starts to rise. Because now the conversation isn't just about the past. It's about the present reaction. Ray J starts pressing, not aggressively at first, but directly, trying to get clarity, trying to force a stance. Because in his mind, this isn't something you can stay neutral on. Either you believe him or you don't. And Cam, he keeps trying to stay in the middle, which only makes things worse. Because now every response feels like avoidance. Every answer feels incomplete. Every attempt to stay balanced feels like stepping away from the truth. And that's when the emotional shift happens. Because you can hear it in Ray J's voice. The frustration turns into something deeper. Hurt, real hurt. The kind that doesn't come from one conversation, but from years of feeling like nobody is listening. And then, it happens. The line, "You don't believe me," because you want to them. Everything stops. No laughter. No smooth transition. Just a moment where the entire energy of the room changes. Because that wasn't just a statement. That was an accusation. A direct challenge to Cam's integrity, his intentions, his perspective. And from that point on, there's no going back. Now the conversation isn't about facts. It's personal. Because what Ray J just did was flip the entire dynamic. Instead of defending his story, he questioned why it wasn't being believed. And more importantly, he suggested a motive, attraction, bias, influence. And that hits differently. Because now it's not just about truth versus lies. It's about perception versus desire. And that's uncomfortable for everyone watching. Cam's reaction? You can see it. He doesn't explode. He doesn't fire back aggressively. But you can tell that line crossed something. Because now he's being put in a position he didn't want to be in. Forced to defend himself instead of just observing. And he tries to recover, tries to clarify, tries to explain that his stance isn't about disbelief. It's about not having enough information. But at this point, that explanation doesn't land. Because Ray J isn't looking for logic anymore. He's reacting emotionally. And once emotion takes over, logic doesn't work the same way. Now here's where the situation escalates even further. Because instead of calming down, Ray J doubles down. He starts repeating himself. "I'm telling the truth. I have proof. I can show everything." His voice gets more intense, more urgent, almost like he's trying to break through an invisible wall. Because in his mind, the problem isn't the story. The problem is that nobody wants to accept it. And that's when the first twist hits. Because as the conversation continues, something becomes very clear. This isn't just about convincing Cam. This is about convincing everyone watching. Because Ray J isn't just speaking to one person. He's speaking to an audience that already has an opinion. An audience that has seen years of headlines, clips, narratives that shaped how they view him. And that's the real challenge. Because changing one person's mind is difficult, but changing millions? Almost impossible. And that realization starts to show. Because the more Ray J talks, the more it feels like he's fighting something bigger than the conversation itself. He's fighting an image, a reputation, a version of himself that has already been accepted by the public. And here's the twist. The harder he tries to prove his truth, the less believable he starts to look. Not because he's lying, but because of how he's being perceived. His intensity, his emotion, his urgency, all of it starts working against him. And that's the most dangerous part of this entire situation. Because now it doesn't matter what he says. People are judging how he says it. And once that happens, the narrative starts slipping out of his control again. Now let's talk about what makes this even more complicated. Because while Ray J is pushing hard for belief, Cam is still trying to maintain balance, still trying to keep things from going too far, still trying to avoid turning the conversation into something explosive. But at this point, that balance feels impossible, because the energy in the room has already shifted. The tension is too high, the emotions are too real, and the audience, they're watching every second, analyzing every reaction, picking sides, because now this isn't just an interview moment, it's a viral moment. And once something becomes viral, it stops being controlled. Clips get cut, lines get highlighted, moments get taken out of context, and the narrative evolves in real time. Now here's where the situation takes another turn. Because as the conversation continues, you can see something happening with Cam. A shift, not in what he's saying, but in how he's responding. He becomes more cautious, more aware of how things are being perceived. Because now it's not just about the conversation, it's about the impact. And that's when the dynamic flips again. Because now, instead of Ray J trying to convince Cam, Cam is trying to manage the situation, trying to prevent it from going too far, trying to keep things from turning into something that can't be controlled. But the damage is already done, because that one line, that accusation, changed everything. And now, the audience is left with a new question. Is Ray J exposing something real, or is this another moment where emotion is clouding the truth? Because at this point, it's no longer clear. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because it's not just about what was said, it's about what people believe. And belief is already divided. Some people are siding with Ray J, saying he's finally speaking his truth, that his emotion proves authenticity, that his frustration makes sense after years of being misunderstood. But others, they're seeing something completely different. They're seeing instability, desperation, a moment where emotion overrides logic. And that divide is only getting bigger, because the more this moment gets replayed, the more people pick sides. And once sides are picked, the narrative becomes even harder to change. Now the conversation isn't just about Ray J and Cam. It's about perception, credibility, truth, and the power of public opinion. And here's the real twist. Even if Ray J is telling the truth, that doesn't mean people will accept it. Because in today's world, truth isn't just about facts. It's about believability. And right now, that's the one thing he's struggling to control. But what happens next? That's where things get even more intense. Because once a moment like this goes viral, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It evolves. And it starts pulling in more voices, more reactions, more perspectives that can either support the story or completely tear it apart. And trust me, the next phase of this situation, it doesn't calm down. It gets louder. The moment that line went viral, everything changed. What started as an intense interview between Ray J and Camnewton didn't stay contained to that room for long. Clips started spreading. Fast. Not full context. Not the full conversation. Just that one moment. You don't believe me because you want to **** them. And just like that, the internet exploded. Because now, the story wasn't just about what Ray J was saying. It was about how he said it. Memes started flooding timelines. Some people laughing, others uncomfortable, and a third group actually listening, breaking down every word, every expression, every shift in tone. Because buried inside that emotional outburst, there was something deeper, something people hadn't fully paid attention to before. And that's where the escalation begins. Within hours, social media turned into a battlefield. One side stood firmly with Ray J. Y'all laughing, but he's been trying to tell the truth. He's frustrated because nobody listens. This man is breaking down in real time and y'all calling it entertainment? To them, this wasn't a viral moment. It was a cry for help. A moment where years of built-up pressure finally came out. But then, the other side pushed back hard. This isn't proof of truth. It's emotional instability. If he had real proof, he wouldn't be yelling like this. He's making himself look worse. And just like that, the divide got deeper. Because now it wasn't just about the Kardashians. It wasn't just about the past. It was about credibility. Meanwhile, Cam Newton found himself in a situation he clearly didn't expect. Because now, he wasn't just the interviewer. He was part of the story. People started analyzing his reactions, his facial expressions, his tone. Why didn't he back Ray J up? Why did he stay neutral? Does he actually not believe him? And suddenly, Cam's attempt to stay balanced started looking like avoidance, which made the situation even more uncomfortable. Because neutrality in a moment like this doesn't always feel neutral. Feels like a choice. And now people were asking, which side did he really stand on? But here's where things take a turn that nobody expected. Because while everyone was focused on the viral moment, a new conversation started forming underneath it. Quiet at first, but gaining traction fast. People started revisiting older clips, older interviews, older statements from Ray J, and something stood out. He's been saying the same thing for years, not always clearly, not always in the same tone, but the core message, consistent, that what the public believes about his connection to the Kardashian family isn't the full story. Now that realization, it changed how some people saw the viral moment, because instead of looking like a random outburst, it started looking like a breaking point, a moment where someone who's been ignored for too long finally snaps. And that's where the shocking reveal hits. Backhand index pointing right, this wasn't the first time he tried to speak. It was just the loudest. And this is where things get even deeper, because the real issue isn't just what Ray J is saying. It's how people are receiving it. Think about it. If someone calm, composed, and perfectly presented said the exact same thing, would people react differently? Most likely. But because it's Ray J, because of his history, his personality, his delivery, people hesitate, they question, they doubt, which leads to the most uncomfortable realization of all. Backhand index pointing right, sometimes truth isn't rejected because it's false. Backhand index pointing right, it's rejected because of who is saying it. And that's the part that's making people uneasy. Because now, the conversation isn't just about Ray J. It's about how society decides who is believable and who isn't. At the same time, the Kardashian family became part of the conversation again, without even speaking. No response, no statement, no engagement. And that silence spoke volumes. Because while Ray J was emotional, loud, and trying to explain, their side remained calm, controlled, and untouched. And that contrast only reinforced their image, which makes the situation even more complicated. Because now it feels like two completely different strategies. One side, emotional, reactive, trying to be heard. The other, silent, controlled, letting perception do the work. And in the public eye, silence often looks stronger. But here's the moment that truly shifted everything. A clip resurfaced, one that most people ignored before. In it, Ray J calmly explains parts of his story. No yelling, no accusations, just details. And when people saw that version of him, something clicked. Wait, why didn't this go viral? Why didn't people focus on this? And that's when the final realization hit. Backhand index pointing right, the loudest moment isn't always the most important one. Backhand index pointing right, it's just the one people pay attention to. And that's exactly what happened here. Because the emotional outburst overshadowed everything else. The details, the claims, the consistency, all buried under one viral line. Right now, the situation is more complicated than ever. Because we're no longer asking, is Ray J right or wrong? We're asking, are we even listening properly? Because if his message has been consistent, if his frustration is real, if his claims haven't changed, then maybe the problem isn't just what he's saying. Maybe it's how we're choosing to hear it. And that changes everything. Because now, one question is louder than ever. Backhand index pointing right, what if Ray J actually does have proof? And what if that proof hasn't been fully revealed yet? Because if that moment comes, if he drops something undeniable, if the narrative shifts completely, then this viral outburst won't look crazy anymore. It'll look justified. And trust me, if that happens, everything we think we know right now could flip overnight. By the time that clip hit everyone's timeline, it wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. From TikTok edits to podcast breakdowns, the moment where Ray J confronted Cam Newton had officially turned into one of the most talked about conversations online. And just like every viral moment, the internet split. Hard. Fireside 1. Ray J is finally telling the truth. A huge wave of people immediately jumped in support of Ray J. Not because of how he said it, but because of what they believe he's been trying to say for years. Y'all ignoring the message because you don't like the delivery. He's been consistent this whole time. That frustration, that's what happens when nobody listens to you. For these supporters, this wasn't a breakdown. It was a breaking point. They started pulling up older interviews, clips, and statements, pointing out that Ray J's story hasn't really changed over time. And that consistency, it made people pause. Because in a world full of changing narratives, consistency stands out. Some even went further, saying, if a calmer, more polished celebrity said the same thing, y'all would believe it instantly. And that argument started gaining traction, fast. High voltage side too. This made him look worse, but on the other side, the reaction was completely different. This didn't help him at all. If you're telling the truth, why come off like that? He just proved why people don't take him seriously. For this group, the focus wasn't on the message. It was on the delivery. They saw the emotional outburst as a loss of control, something that damaged his credibility instead of strengthening it. And in today's viral culture, presentation matters a lot, because once a clip gets clipped, edited, and shared millions of times, people aren't analyzing the full context. They're reacting to the moment, and that moment didn't look calm, didn't look controlled, which made it easier for skeptics to dismiss everything else he said. Microphone industry voices, subtle but powerful. Meanwhile, people inside the industry started reacting, but not directly. No one wanted to jump in and pick a side publicly. But the shade? It was there. Subtle tweets, cryptic posts, comments that didn't mention names, but clearly referenced the situation. One influencer posted, sometimes the loudest person in the room isn't wrong, just tired. Another wrote, people don't always reject truth, they reject how it's delivered. And those lines, they spread. Screenshots went viral. And suddenly, the conversation shifted again. Because now, it wasn't just about Ray J versus the Kardashians. It was about something bigger. Backhand index pointing right truth versus presentation. Backhand index pointing right emotion versus credibility. Backhand index pointing right narrative versus reality. Brain Cam Newton's reaction gets scrutinized. At the same time, Cam Newton became part of the discussion in a way he probably didn't expect. People started analyzing everything he did in that moment. His facial expressions, his tone, his pauses. Why didn't he back Ray J up? Why did he stay neutral? Was he trying to protect himself or protect the narrative? And just like that, Cam's balanced approach started getting questioned. Because in moments like this, neutrality can feel like a decision. And the internet doesn't like uncertainty. They want clear sides, clear opinions, clear winners and losers. But Cam didn't give them that. And that made things even more complicated. Chart decreasing, the Kardashian silence speaks loudest. Then there's the Kardashian family. No response, no statement, no engagement. And somehow, that silence became the strongest move of all. Because while Ray J was trending, reacting, and trying to explain, their image stayed exactly the same, untouched, unbothered, and in the world of public perception. That matters, because silence often gets interpreted as control, confidence, even power. And that contrast, Ray J's emotional intensity versus their calm silence, only reinforced the narrative people were already used to. Police car light, the bigger conversation takes over. At this point, the story stopped being just about one moment. It turned into a larger debate. Backhand index pointing right, who controls the narrative? Backhand index pointing right, does emotion weaken truth or prove it? Backhand index pointing right, can someone be right and still not be believed? Because now people aren't just reacting to Ray J. They're questioning how public opinion works, how stories are shaped, how certain voices get believed, while others don't. Fire where things stand now. Right now, the situation is more divided than ever. Some people are saying, Ray J finally exposed everything. Others are saying, he just hurt his own credibility. And the truth? Still unclear. Because we're not just dealing with facts. We're dealing with perception. And perception is powerful. But here's the part that keeps everyone watching. Because if Ray J decides to follow this up, if he brings actual proof, if he drops something undeniable, then everything we're debating right now could change instantly. And trust me, that possibility is exactly why the story isn't going away anytime soon. Just when it felt like the internet had already picked its sides, one quiet detail started changing everything. Not a loud clip, not another viral outburst, not even a response from the Kardashian family, but something much more subtle, pattern. Because as people kept rewatching the moment between Ray J and Cam Newton, they started noticing something strange. The viral line, the one everyone focused on, wasn't actually the most important part of what Ray J said. It was just the loudest. And once people went back and listened carefully, a different version of the story started to emerge. A version that didn't rely on emotion, but on consistency. Because in older clips that didn't trend, clips that didn't get millions of views, Ray J was saying the same things. Calmly, clearly, without shouting, without frustration. And that realization, it hit hard. Because it raised a dangerous question. Backhand index pointing right, what if the emotional moment distracted everyone from the real message? Now think about that. If the loudest clip becomes the only thing people remember, then everything else gets buried. The details, the claims, the context, all replaced by one viral sentence that shapes the entire narrative. And that's where the twist begins. Because now, the conversation isn't just about what Ray J said. It's about what people chose to focus on. And why? Warning, the shift no one expected. At the same time, something else started happening. Quietly, without headlines, without drama, people began revisiting Ray J's older statements with a different mindset. Not to laugh, not to dismiss, but to analyze. And the more they did, the more one thing stood out. Backhand index pointing right, his story hasn't really changed, which creates a new kind of tension. Because inconsistency usually weakens credibility. But consistency, even when delivered emotionally, forces people to reconsider. Brain, the real twist. Perception might be the problem. And that leads to the most uncomfortable possibility of all. What if the issue isn't whether Ray J is telling the truth, but whether people are willing to believe him? Because let's be honest, public trust isn't equal. Some people are believed instantly. Others have to fight for every ounce of credibility. And Ray J, he's been fighting for years, which makes this moment feel different. Because it doesn't look like someone creating a new story. It looks like someone reacting to a story that's already been written about him and trying to rewrite it. Fire Cam Newton's silence becomes suspicious. Meanwhile, Cam Newton has remained relatively quiet after the moment went viral. No strong follow-up, no clear stance, no direct clarification. And now, that silence is being interpreted in multiple ways. Some say he's staying neutral. Others say he's avoiding controversy. But a growing number of people are asking something else entirely. Backhand index pointing right, did that moment catch him off guard? Or expose something he didn't want to address? Because the truth is, his reaction in that moment wasn't aggressive. It wasn't dismissive. It was careful. Almost like he realized, in real time, that the conversation had gone somewhere deeper than expected. And once you see it that way, feels different. Bomb the cliffhanger that changes everything. But here's the part that should really make you pause. Because according to whispers starting to circulate online, Ray J might not be done. Not even close. There are claims, unconfirmed but spreading fast, that he has more. More details. More context. Possibly even proof. And if that's true, then everything we've seen so far is just the beginning. Because imagine this. What happens if he actually releases something concrete? Something undeniable? Something that shifts the narrative completely? Suddenly, that viral moment won't look like a breakdown. It'll look like a warning. Police car light where we are now. Right now, the story is stuck in one place. Uncertainty. Some people believe him. Some people don't. And most people, they're waiting. Waiting for the next move. Because in situations like this, the first viral moment isn't the end. It's the trigger. And whatever comes next is what defines everything. Fire final question. So now the real question is, backhand index pointing right, was that emotional outburst just a moment of frustration? Or was it the start of something much bigger? Because if Ray J really does have more to show, then this entire situation is about to flip. And when it does, the people who dismissed him first might be the ones caught completely off guard. And trust me, if that happens, this won't just be a viral moment anymore. It'll be a turning point. Now I need to hear from you, because this situation is way deeper than just a viral moment. Do you think Ray J was actually speaking the truth, or did his emotions make everything look worse than it really is? And what about Cam Newton? Was he being fair by staying neutral, or did that neutrality feel like disbelief? Be honest, because right now, the internet is completely divided. Some people are saying Ray J finally exposed something real. Others are saying he damaged his own credibility in seconds. So where do you stand? Backhand index pointing down, drop your opinion in the comments. No filters. Was that moment a breakdown or a breakthrough? And here's the bigger question nobody is asking enough. If Ray J really does have proof, are people actually ready to accept it? Or has the narrative already been decided? Make sure you like this video if you made it this far, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because if anything else drops, if new clips surface, or if Ray J responds again, you already know we're covering it instantly. Trust me, this story isn't over, and the next update, it might completely change everything you think you know.